What's up, guys? For today's video, I'm going over the most important things to keep in mind when you're shopping for a used aluminum boat. So for this video, I'm going to be going over how to avoid basically getting burned on Facebook deals or other situations where you're buying a used boat from somebody. At this point, I now have purchased about 5 used boats and have seen enough issues that I am more than comfortable to start giving you guys this information. The first thing I'm going to talk about is what to look for on the actual boat. The second section is going to be what to look for on the trailer. Third section is what's going to be looked for on your motor. And the fourth and most important section is what to look for with the paperwork. To get started, let's talk about the boat. When you're buying a used boat, there's a couple things that you want to keep in mind. The first is, what are your intentions for the boat? Are you going to be rebuilding this from the ground up? Are you looking to just slap a motor on it and head out onto the water? And also, what's your skill level? If you have a small hole in the floor, it's missing a rivet, those kind of things are pretty simple to fix. But if you're dealing with some larger issues like a crack going down the side or on the front, or if you're dealing with really bad corrosion or things that require welding, think about that in the added cost of the actual boat. This boat is a really good example. The previous owner, when they removed the decking that was in here, I believe they used a cutoff wheel of some kind, and they actually cut right into the braces on each side. So not that huge a deal. They didn't cut into the hull, but to have this fixed, I need to hire a welder. I'm looking at about $500 extra just to have the damage repaired. This wasn't something that was obvious to me when I bought the boat because it was covered up in a lot of ways. It looks really obvious now that I've cleaned it up with the wire wheel. So with that in mind, think about how much the actual repairs are going to cost versus the budget that you're trying to spend. Sometimes getting the absolute cheapest boat you can find is not always the best option. So there's a couple specific areas to check for damage that tends to be the most common places you'll see it. In the front, there's basically 2 spots that I always check. Near the bow eye or the tow hook, depending on how they have this rigged up here, this can be completely destroyed. I've seen cracks and holes and multiple things filled in because they keep adding bow eyes. Usually it's from an improper trailer setup, but this is where you're gonna see that damage. Most of the time this is fixable, but I've seen some pretty bad damage up front here, so always check right up here. While you're in the front of the boat, always check the front runners here. This is where people hit into things. You can get punctures and dents and things like that. A good example is right off the front here. It's kind of hard to see from certain angles, but there's a pretty strong dent right there. Not a big deal. There's no cracks or whatever, so it's just a little bit of a cosmetic issue, but definitely things to keep in mind all along the front. You can see if the boat has ever been overweighted by looking at the rivets. If the rivets are pulled into the boat and like mushroomed around here, that generally means that there was too much stress pushing on the outside of the boat, which is causing the rivets to deform the hull. This one's pretty good, but if you can kind of see an example of it down here, how it's like a little bit of mushroomed in, that could be a sign that there was too much weight in the boat. Now this was decked at some point, so it's a possibility, but judging how most of the other ones are okay, there's probably no issues with that. Always, always, always get under the boat and look. Things you're going to want to look for are repairs done with things like JB Weld or silicone, or just basically repaired in a patch manner and not the correct way. If you get under there and you're seeing holes and cracks on the ribs, those are probably the worst to deal with. They're pretty hard to fix on your own, so consider that everything you can't fix on your own, you're going to be paying somebody else to fix. Last place that's a pretty hot item for issues is the transom. If it's an older boat, there's going to be holes all over the transom thanks to multiple transducer installs and patches and things like that. Here's a good example. There was a transducer installed right here. I started picking off the silicone some, and you can see the holes are there. 2 little holes, no big deal. You can pop some rivets and silicone in them and that'll be fixed up. But if it gets to the point where the back of the boat's starting to look a bit like Swiss cheese, you might want to consider what you're doing with that boat. So damage aside, there's one other thing to look for with hulls, and that is corrosion. The one thing that can absolutely destroy a boat that you can't really fix is corrosion. I'm gonna throw some pictures up on the screen here while I'm talking about it, but basically I purchased another 1648 boat before this one that I had really high hopes on a really nice restoration. When I bought the boat, the floor was covered in leaves, so I couldn't really get down to see the flooring exactly, but the rest of the boat looked in really good condition. Then I got it home, I cleaned it up, and then I saw it. The entire boat was covered in pitting and corrosion. And that's because the previous owner built their entire deck out of pressure treated wood. If you guys don't know this, never use pressure treated wood with aluminum. The solution they use to treat the wood has copper. Copper destroys aluminum. It just eats it away and deteriorates it into nothing. After taking the bench seats out, I found holes, I found cracks, I found pitting everywhere. Luckily, it came with enough accessories on it, such as a motor and trolling motor, that I was able to sell those things off and then flip the hull and make about a couple $100s off the whole deal. But the hull itself ended up not being usable and I just had to scrap it. All right, so after the hull, the next thing you really want to look at is if your boat is coming with an engine. If they can run the motor in front of you and it runs, you're off to a pretty good start. If they can't run the motor in front of you, assume it's a dead motor. Assume that going into the deal, going into the situation, they might say, oh, it ran last year or this, that, or the other thing. Unless they can get it running in front of you, just assume it's a bad motor. If you go into it assuming it's a bad motor and you factor that into your budget, if you're able to get it working, great, you just made the money on a new motor. If you can't get it working, at least you can sell the motor off for someone for parts or someone who might be better at fixing motors or who wants to take the time to get it running. But never trust somebody when they're telling you that the motor runs, because 9 times out of 10, they don't even know if it's running. It may have ran for them in the past. They may have been only get it to start and run for a couple seconds. You don't know the history. You'll never know the real history. Don't trust anyone when they say that the motor runs unless they can demo it for you. Now, if you're a little bit more handy and you know how to work on engines, there's definitely things that you can test on a motor before you buy it. You can check the compression with a compression tester to make sure that the cylinders are good. You can check on the electronics. You can look at the wiring to make sure nothing's corroded. If you're into motors, then you already know what to look for with a motor. But if you're fresh to boats and you're fresh to motors, unless they can demo it for you, don't consider that part of the deal because you have no way of knowing what you're getting with the motor. Now, a great example of this is the 1648 I had before this. The owner said that it ran. It looked in pretty bad condition, honestly, but he wasn't able to show me, so I went into the deal assuming that I never had that motor. Luckily, I know the bare minimum when it comes to motors, so I was able to pull the carb, get it all cleaned up, and it actually fired right up. So I got lucky in that situation, and I was able to then sell that motor to make up the cost of the entire purchase. There are times when you'll get lucky like that, and there's a lot of times where you won't. So unless you know what you're doing with motors, make sure they demo it, and if they can't, just assume that you're buying the hull only, and that if the motor works, it's a bonus to your budget. Next up is going to be the trailer. Always check with the buyer on the state of the trailer so you don't get stranded on your way home, and also added cost. Trailer wheels, they're not cheap. They go for about $100 a pop, give or take, depending on sizing, and that just adds to your cost. If they have new wheels on the trailer, great, now you've saved that money. Something else about this trailer I'm gonna have to do is all of the lights are busted. There's no lights on the back, no lights on the side, the front wiring's all bad, so I actually have a wiring kit sitting up here. That cost about $60, $70 for that, and then now that's gonna be a couple hours of my time getting everything fixed up. So all these little things factor into what you're buying. Another part of the trailer you wanna check is the winch system. This winch system is pretty gnarly. I was able to bring it back by a little bit of WD-40 and some grease and a little bit of elbow grease. We at least have a functional winch for now, but in my opinion, a couple of these items are gonna need to be replaced. The trailer jack's gonna need to be replaced. It has no crank on it. The front tongue looks in pretty good condition, but the latch is all rusted, so I'm gonna be needing to replace that. And as I said, the winch. $50, $50, $50, now you've got another $150 into your build. Lastly on the trailer are your bunks. Check your bunks, see if they're gonna be needing to be replaced. These are all rotted out, so I'm gonna have to be replacing all of the bunks. On the back here, you can see how it's snapped here. That one's sitting wrong. I mean, there's a lot of work to do in this trailer. So with the trailer information out of the way, I want to get into the most important part of buying a boat, and that is the paperwork. I can't stress this enough because of its importance. Do not buy a boat without a title unless you're prepared to go through a whole bunch of issues to get it. Do not trust anybody if they say they're going to give you the title at a later point. Ask me how I know. If you guys have been following the channel, you probably haven't seen this boat yet, and there's a good reason for that. The previous boat that I bought that I was doing the restore on was the one that I referenced and showed pictures of with all the corrosion, and that boat ended up having to be scrapped. You can't save a boat when it's just rotting out from the inside. So unfortunately, that project died, but I did get a new project. This is the one that actually got stranded with the bad trailer wheel. Well, the guy was really cool. He was really nice. You know, we worked out a good price on everything, and I asked him, multiple times before I went if he had a title. He said yes. Asked him 3 times on the way if he had the title. He said yes. I get there and he says, hey man, sorry, I lied. I don't actually have the title. It's at my ex-wife's house. I'll give it to you tomorrow. So with the title coming the next day, I ended up giving him half down with the intention of giving the other half the next day and getting the title. Well, that's been about 2 weeks ago now, and I still don't have a title for this boat. Each state has different processes for how they handle this. Some states don't even require a title on a boat, but here in Ohio, they need boats titled in order to get your registration. So I basically had to contact a title investigator for the state who looks into the information provided from the buyer, provided from the title owner, and puts together a packet that we then send to a court, and a judge has to rule on if I am now the rightful owner of this boat, and if so, I can use their ruling to go obtain a new title in my name. Isn't necessarily difficult, but it is very time consuming. I still haven't got to the point of submitting my court documents. That'll be done later next week. There's about $350 of filing fees. Then I have a court appearance, and then I gotta wait for a ruling. So really make sure you have a title when you're buying a boat. If you don't have the title, the boat is basically a paperweight. And that's also why I haven't done anything to this yet. Until I have that title paper in my hand, I'm not considering this boat as my own, and I'm not putting any time or money into it. So unfortunately, that's kind of slowing up the new Jon Boat videos, which I was really excited to get out there, but I thought this would be a great opportunity to give you guys some information. I know a lot of you guys are out there searching for boats right now. The pickings are very slim, and when the pickings get slim, people start getting a little desperate and you start making some concessions that you usually wouldn't. Don't make your concession on the title. It's gonna be a nightmare. Just don't do it to yourself. I promise you, you're gonna regret it. All right, guys, well, that's my most important things to look for when I'm shopping for a new boat. Keep these things in mind and you'll keep yourself from having to spend extra after you get your build. I'm hoping to have some new videos out on this boat really soon. Once I get all the paperwork straightened out, I'm gonna do a full walkthrough on this, give you guys the full tour. But if I can get this boat ready, it is gonna be a killer build. I am super excited about it. It is the platform that I have been dying to build on. It's a beautiful 1648 Mod V. It's gonna be good. So hopefully I'll have more on that soon. In the meantime, I got some other cool videos on the horizon. I got a couple things to do with this boat that I think would be safe to do while I'm waiting. I'm gonna be pulling the kayaks down soon and getting that ready to go fishing. So if you guys like this content, let me know by hitting that like button. If you wanna see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe, and thanks for watching. Any of you guys raise chickens? I just picked up a bunch of quail. I don't really know too much about them, but I got them in their little brooding box here, hoping to get some eggs and meat this year. What do you guys think?